Welcome back, focused learners, to another explainer. Today, we are looking at something truly monumental. Think about building a massive skyscraper. You wouldn't just start stacking bricks on a whim, right? No, you need a master blueprint. Well, today, we're exploring the ultimate master blueprint for one of the largest democracies on the planet, the constitutional blueprint of Indian education. We are going to trace this incredible journey, looking at exactly how Indian education evolved from this highly exclusive colonial privilege into a literal, non-negotiable fundamental right for millions of people.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We've got 5 main chapters today. We'll start with the historical roots, move into the core constitutional blueprint, explore the climax of education becoming a fundamental right, examine the supporting principles and duties, and finally, look at how the courts actually enforce this entire structure.
Starting off with Section 1, the roots of Indian education, moving from a colonial privilege to a national vision.
Now, to really appreciate the blueprint we have today, we first have to understand the initial problem. The earliest educational frameworks in India, they absolutely were not designed for the masses. They were highly exclusive, mostly just intended to serve the administrative needs of the ruling power rather than empower the everyday citizen. Back in 1813, the Charter Act gave the very first formal state recognition to education. But the real turning point was 1835 with Macaulay's Minute. Macaulay's explicit, incredibly elitist goal was to create a class that was, in his words, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste. It pretty much completely marginalized indigenous learning systems. Then, fast forward to 1854, we get Wood's Dispatch. This is often called the Magna Carta of English education in India. It laid down the foundation for a graded school system in the very first major universities, but make no mistake, it was still heavily tied to colonial management.
But watch what happens post-independence. The entire energy shifts. The newly independent nation formed commissions that completely rewrote the blueprint's goal. First, you have the Radhakrishnan Commission laying the groundwork for higher education and the UGC. Then the Mudaliar Commission comes in and restructures secondary schools. But the absolute powerhouse here was the Kothari Commission in the mid-1960s. Their slogan was literally education and national development. They recommended a common school system and explicitly pushed for 6% of the GDP to go to education. We went straight from colonial privilege into widespread national access.
Which brings us to Section 2, the constitutional blueprint itself, building equality and inclusion. So, if those historical commissions were the brainstorming sessions, the Constitution is the living architecture, precisely designed to dismantle those historical social barriers we just talked about. Articles 114 and 15 form the foundational slab of this entire blueprint. Article 14 ensures equality before the law, which is your basic baseline for equal educational opportunity. But Article 15 is where the absolute prohibition of discrimination happens. It explicitly bans discrimination based on religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth when it comes to accessing state educational institutions. This right here is the absolute bedrock of inclusion.
But, equality isn't just about ignoring differences, right? It's about actually leveling the playing field. So the blueprint includes special provisions. Article 15, specifically, clauses 3, 4, and 5, allow the state to make targeted schemes and reservations for women, children, and socially and educationally backward classes. And yes, that includes private educational institutions. But there's a hidden structural support here that is absolutely crucial. Article 24. This prohibits hazardous child labor for kids under 14. Because, think about it, without banning child labor, kids are trapped in factories. Article 24 is the mechanism that actually allows a child to step foot inside a school in the first place.
The blueprint also balances perfectly when it comes to religion and culture. Articles 25 through 28 ensure that state-funded schools remain strictly secular, meaning absolutely no forced religious instruction. But right after that, Articles 29 and 30 fiercely protect the cultural and educational rights of minorities, giving them the constitutional right to establish and administer their own educational institutions. It's just a brilliant architectural balance between secular public funding and the preservation of minority cultures. All right, moving into Section 3, education as a right. This is the climax of the blueprint. Everything we've discussed so far sets the stage for the most crucial architectural upgrade in this entire explainer, the exact moment education became an enforceable right. I want you to really take in this quote. The state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years. That is Article 21A, inserted by the 86th Amendment Act in 2002. And this changed everything. It elevated elementary education from a mere suggestion into a fundamental right.
It means the state is legally bound to ensure every single child in that age bracket gets an education.
And to put that into perspective, it brings us to this big number, 25. What does this mean in reality? Well, to actually execute Article 21A, the government passed the Right to Education Act, or RTE, in 2009. The RTE Act mandates a 25% reservation in unaided private schools for children from weaker sections and disadvantaged groups, with the state reimbursing the costs. So this wasn't just some policy on paper, it forced a massive 25% structural integration in classrooms across the entire country.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, Principles, Duties, and Languages. Think of this as the scaffolding and maintenance of our building. If fundamental rights are the steel beams of our building, the directive principles are the scaffolding guiding the state, and the fundamental duties are the routine maintenance required by the citizens. And this brilliantly illustrates how those two sides interact. We have Article 21A, which we just covered, the state's hard duty to provide education. But perfectly paired with that, inserted by that exact same 86th Amendment, is Article 51AK. This makes it a fundamental duty of every parent or guardian to provide opportunities for their child to go to school. It is a total symbiotic relationship. The state builds the school, but the citizen must supply the student. And the wider framework zooms out even further. The revised Article 45 focuses on early childhood care for kids under 6, creating a continuum of care right up to elementary school. Article 46 specifically directs the state to promote the educational interests of weaker sections. And then we have the language articles, which are fascinating. Article 350A directs that primary instruction should be in the mother tongue to reduce early learning barriers, while Article 351 places responsibility on the union to promote the spread of Hindi. It's a very delicate balance of mother tongue inclusivity right alongside national integration.
Finally, we reach Section 5, the courts and the law, enforcing the blueprint.
Because let's be honest, a blueprint is completely useless without building inspectors to make sure the work is actually getting done. That is where the federal legislature and the Supreme Court step in. Originally, education was strictly on the state list, meaning only individual states controlled it, but the 42nd Amendment in 1976 moved education to the concurrent list. This was a huge deal. It meant both the center and the states could legislate on it cooperatively. Without this shift, massive national programs like the Right to Education Act literally wouldn't have been possible. And when the laws were challenged, the courts had the final say. So the crucial point here is how judicial activism literally forced the government's hand. In the 1992 Mohini Jain case, the Supreme Court declared that the right to life inherently includes the right to education. A year later, the Uni Krishnan case laid the framework that eventually became Article 21A. Later, in 2008, the Ashoka Kumar Thakur case saw the court uphold the 93rd Amendment, confirming that reservations for OBCs in educational institutions are completely constitutional. The courts have actively defended the blueprint's vision of social justice.
We've seen a massive journey today in this explainer, from Macaulay's elitism designed for the very few to a comprehensive constitutional framework topped by the Right to Education Act, ensuring access for all. The tools, the laws, and the mandates are all firmly in place. But I want to leave you with this final thought. The Constitution provides a flawless blueprint for universal education, but is the architecture fully built in reality? It's a question that challenges us to look beyond the blueprint and examine the actual classrooms of today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.